Great. Welcome everybody to our session on the role of donors in supporting the scale-ups of social enterprises. We are the subgroup of the community of practice that works on scaling up of social enterprises. Imago Global Grassroots, where I work, and One Acre Fund are the co-chairs of this group. And we're very happy today to have an amazing panel to talk about this topic, which is it goes beyond social enterprises, but today we're going to be talking about it from the point of view of an organization who is trying to scale up. So with that, Joseph, you can start sharing the slides. So today we have 4 panelists, and for that I'm going to start just with some opening remarks. Then we will have Álvaro Henzler from Mosaico. I'll introduce him just before he speaks. Then Ernenek and Durán from the One Drop Foundation, Lazos de Agua. Then María, Elena, Nawar from IDB Lab. Habiba from Sosai Renewable Energies. Nicola, Okero from the Food for Education. And then we hope that if we do observe the 10 minutes for each presenter, we'll be able to have half-an-hour discussion that I will moderate. So if we go to the next, a little bit about Imago. We work with organizations all around the world, both social enterprises and grassroots. We basically, our vision is to see solutions that are coming from the grassroots to reach global scale. And that's why scaling up is such an important topic for us. The next. In my experience working in the World Bank for 30 years, I saw that there were lots of government and aid agencies and impact investors which had a lot of money and technical capacity, but were unable to reach the poorest in those really difficult development questions. And there were local NGOs, grassroots, and social enterprises who were really rich in the knowledge and the community buy-in, but they were stuck at a low resource capacity level, unable to really scale. And that's that missing middle that very few organizations, with the exception probably of BRAC, have been able to really reach. So this is why we have this group about scaling up of social enterprises. Let's go to the next. So a few words on the challenge with donors. Johannes Lin and Richard Cole, also part of the community of practice, are doing a much broader paper on the issue of mainstreaming scaling up in the donor community. But our focus here is much more coming from the grassroots and the social entrepreneurs. And we see 3 problems. The first one is that there's a lot of money for innovation, but not for scaling up. Even when the donors have many of them scaling up in their mission, and many of them have subscribed to the Sustainable Development Goals which require scale, but it's not financed. The second, and is something that Larry and I have written a paper on, is that the intermediation role is very important for scaling up, but it's underfunded. And the third is that it is very challenging to scale innovations from the base of the pyramid through the government. We think that even though the market has a role to play, scaling through the government for social entrepreneurs, for innovations from the grassroots, it's really the big highway that would allow for real scale, which is comparable to the challenges that we have in development. Let's go to the next. We have started working on this donor continuum, and we really want to crowdsource a lot of it because all of you have knowledge about some part of it. But there's a lot of financing that goes from high-risk philanthropy, small $50,000 grants, angel investors. We have the UNDP Lab, the Peary Foundation. And then as we go through the continuum, we see that other, like the Development Innovations Ventures from USAID and the Global Innovation Fund and a lot of philanthropy are funding pilots. Then they're funding testing, then a transition to scale. Then we have the bilateral funders, the vertical funds, the multilateral and DFI foundations, and finally, the large multilateral development banks. And that this continuum has in itself its own value of depth, that it is not really a continuum, it's not really coordinated. Donors don't see each other's role as complementary, and there's a lot of potential for really working on this. And this is the focus of what I've asked each of the panelists to think about as they do their presentation. So as I said, this is to be crowdsourced. So any additions to this as we put this together are very welcome. So with that, I'm going to move to Álvaro Henzler. Álvaro is an orchestrator of social change in Latin America, and he founded the Mosaico Lab, which is really an organization helping to scale up organizations with social purpose, very much aligned with what we are doing today. If you talk to people in Peru, everybody tells you Álvaro is the person to go on this issue. So we're very grateful, Álvaro, that you're here with us. And with that, if we can stop sharing the screen, and we can have Álvaro come in. There we go.
Gracias, Isabel. Thank you, Isabel. It really is a pleasure to be with you in this morning in the midst of a very intense and deathful political crisis in my country. I give some time to think in the long term and how do we ignite movements, initiatives to really change the landscape of the world, the region, and my country. I will start saying this idea. In the world, we have different challenges and problems in the social, environmental sphere. And I really believe that we have all the solutions to resolve those problems. We do not need any more innovations. We already have. If we have the collective innovation from Africa, Asia, Latin America, we have the solutions. The problem is not the solution for delivering the problem, but that these solutions are very small, they are unconnected among them, and then they are unprofessionalized. They don't know how to scale it to have a more massive impact. So that is the challenge. We were in an era of innovation because probably a lot of decades ago, we don't have every solution for every problem. But now we have almost every solution to tackle the problem we have in health and education and citizenship and democracy and go on. What we really need is how do we go from small to massive? How do we go from unconnected to aligned in an ecosystem of solutions? And how do we go to unprofessionalized sector to a talented, technologized, and a method to go from small to big? And when I try to understand what is the problem of going from small to scale, I think from the donor part, in the last 3 or 4 decades, we have been going into different trends on how to support the social ecosystems. We go from charity to philanthropy, from philanthropy to social responsibility, then to sustainability, then to impact investment, and so on. And I think that is part of the maturity of the ecosystem, that the donors have different technology or different approaches, more sophisticated in terms of how to be part of the big picture of the solution for our global problems. However, when we have going from trend to trend, I think what we have been missing is the scale part. We feel in love for the new trend. We see all the benefits, but I don't think we have made the key questions. If this new technology or financial method really can create a more massive and scale approach to the solution that we already have in our countries. I want to give you 2 examples of the work we do in Mosaico to give you a sense of our view on how to scale solutions. We met with Isabel many years ago when I was in the Kenya school. We changed some words, and I do a research when I was in the Ash Center that talks about innovation, democracy. And I make a lot of interviews, social enterprises in Latin America, a lot of data, quantitative, qualitative, and I have a universe of 100 good initiatives that are creating change. And when I do all the research, I realize that only 1 out of 10 of these social enterprises really create in a relative short amount of time, they acquire a relevant scale for their own ecosystem. Only 1 out of 10, in terms of impact, in terms of reach, in terms of budget, they really reach a significant scale to attain and have a relevant impact in the problems that they are working for. So my question was, what happened with this 1 out of 10? What this one make different from the other 9? And the answer is very simple, actually. The 3 things they do differently is, 1, they create a governance, they create a board, they create an institution that surpasses the power of the hero or the leader or the founder. The second one is that they really invest in creating a professional, talented team. And finally, they create a business model or a theory of change, a theory of problem, theory of change, that they were able to go from small to big. And these 3 things sounds very reasonable. There's nothing magic about what this 1 out of 10 do. However, when I make the questions why they do this 1 out of the 10, 1 is the own personal driver of the founders in terms of what they must do, create the board, create a team, and create a business model. But the other is that they found some investors or donors that believe in the importance of investing in those things and not only in delivering programs or services or products. They found after going through a lot of meetings, some critical amount of investors and donors that believe in their dream, in their vision, but they are capable and willing to invest on those long-term issues. That was the critical difference between the 1 from the other 9. The other example, when Peru celebrated the 200 years of our independence as a country, that was this 2 years ago, we create Próceres del Bicentenario. We have a national context, 300 enterprises apply, we select 21, and we give them a sort of accelerator program. But then when I went to the richest people in Peru to create a fund, we raised a significant amount of money. My pitch was, you already do a lot of good work, and you already do fund donations, philanthropy, charity. But what these people really need is that they need investment to scale. Was a difficult pitch at the beginning because they want to put their money in their programs, in their services, and in the daily basis, in the operations. Even though they were business people, it was difficult that they understand that we want them to invest in their teams, in their technology, in their structures, in their marketing, in their board. I want my money in making the children happier, or in the books, or in the technology, in the vaccines. They are, even though they come from an industry as business that really investment is the key for any scale of any business, was difficult to make the transition that social enterprises also need investment. At the end, we made it. They understand the importance of it, and they create every one of the 21 social enterprises. They create their 3-year scaling plan. It was a competition among them. Only 10 received a significant amount of money. Probably they have never received that amount of money to invest in their own internal structure and governance and team. And many of them, we are just in the process of creating a sort of impact evaluation on how this create some significant change in the enterprises. We have seen significant, in some cases, we have significant scale because of that approach. To end, in terms of recommendations, the things that I have learned during this process, working with a lot of donors in Latin America, I will suggest 3 things in terms of how donors, philanthropists, we have to change our mindset in terms of how do we approach to the social ecosystem and how do we invest and make donations to what really is needed. The first one is that we have to go from I have a commitment to an institution or a solution into I have a commitment to a cause, and I, as a donor, start orchestrating or impacting an ecosystem of solutions, like a portfolio of solutions that really together will be able to attain that cause that for me really matters. Going from funding one person, one institution, to an ecosystem of solutions in terms of CEDA portfolio. The second one is every donation in the whole world have a 1-year period, at the much probably a multi-annual of 2 or 3 years. That is a totally mistake. We have to go into a long-term commitment. We have to probably do a better due diligence, but to commit in a 5 and 10-year period with the initiative we fund. So we want not only to have nice impact to communicate, but we have significant impact and scale in the long term. We have to start thinking in investments in long term and not only in a 1-year basis. And finally, we have to probably stay in donations to deliver or donations to innovate, but we have to reduce that amount of money or importance and go into investment to scale. I totally agree with Isabel, and Mosaico is our main job. How do we fund the scaling part? And we already have a lot of data on how to scale, and donors have to start investment on how to scale and not only donating to charities to have more beautiful and impactful programs, but we have to really have a more massive approach on what we are doing. That's my first intervention, Isabel.
Fantastic, Álvaro. Music to my ears. I could not agree more. Thank you. With that, we're going to now invite Ernenek and Durán, who's the Senior Director for Latin America of the Lazos de Agua One Drop Foundation, a beautiful project that uses art, social theater, creative ways for people to change the behavior that is so difficult to change from the top down. And so with that, Ernenek, over to you.
Thank you, Isabel. Pleasure being here. So yeah, I will first introduce what is One Drop. Well, One Drop is a private foundation based in Montreal, Canada. We were founded by Guy Laliberté, who is also the founder of Cirque du Soleil. And as Isabel mentioned, we have art in our DNA. So Guy, 15 years ago, gave us the mission to ensure sustainable access to safe water, sanitation, and hygiene to communities around the world through innovative partnerships, creativity, and the power of art. So in the past years, I would say since 2014, 2015, we have been kind of creating our model, our approach, and we came out with a model called the ABC for Sustainability, where A stands for access to water and sanitation infrastructure, and to work with the governance structures that are in charge of managing water. B is where all the art and creativity is put into. So we use art, social arts, to transform behaviors in communities. It's well known in the water sector that there is a missing link between infrastructure and sustainable use of infrastructure. So through arts, what we do is we try to trigger a behavior change in communities around the world, to bring them from, let's say, not washing hands to washing hands, to not paying a tariff for the water service to paying a tariff for the water service. And all this, we do it through arts, with the community, for the community. And we always use like traditions, cultures, and we understand the ecosystem where we are working in. And we have had like really good results in using arts to change behaviors. The third component of the model, it's capital. It's where we bring we strengthen the value chain of water and sanitation to make products and services around water and sanitation much more accessible to communities in where we work. So this is like in a nutshell the model and the social art for behavior change approach. Now let me go to Lazos de Agua. Lazos de Agua, it's an initiative that was created by the One Drop Foundation, the FEMSA Foundation, the Inter-American Development Bank, and the Coca-Cola Foundation. And the objective of this program was to bring water and sanitation and hygiene services, sustainable services. Sustainable is very key in the world of water. And we had been working in 5 countries in Latin America. We have been working in Mexico, in Guatemala, in Nicaragua, in Colombia, and in Paraguay. And the idea of this partnership was to bring sustainable water and sanitation services to more than 200,000 people by last year, by 2022. So we reached more than 230 people already, and we are already thinking in scaling up. Right, but as you have heard, we have some challenges in front of us. We think that scaling up can be done. We have proven the model. We have proven that the ABC for sustainability and social art for behavior change are good methodologies and models to tackle some issues around the water and sanitation sector, but the water access problem is huge, right? We know the numbers. There are numbers that says that around 1 million people doesn't have access to sustainable water services in their homes. So the problem is very huge. So for us, what we think is that we can scale up, and we think that we can scale up by replication. Right, and this we have done some tests in this Lazos de Agua program. We have been working with governments in Mexico and in Paraguay. So what we have done is we have transferred some of the tools of the social art for behavior change methodology so that they can use them inside their programs. And thank you, Gabi, so that they can use it inside their programs and they can then expand it to other areas of their work, not only in the collaboration that we have had with them. So this is key for us, and this is what we want to try to do in the next phase, right? So the next phase of Lazos de Agua, it will start by the end of this year, and it will go up to 2030. And the idea is really to scale up and to reach more than 1 million people in the next 6 years. The issue is big. So I think we shouldn't stop there. I think through policy, through grafting, I think we can do much more than the 1 million. And I just want to finish by mentioning that One Drop in the first phase of Lazos de Agua, we play two key roles. One, a founder. We are a foundation. We founded and we supported financially the initiative. But we played a second role that it's key. We thought it's key because we played a role that it's called the strategic implementing partner. Through this role, we played several functions. So we made alignment of the founders of Coca-Cola, FEMSA, the IDB, and us. We created this like ecosystem of founders that were aligned towards one clear vision. We also aligned the executing partners, like the agencies that executed the projects in the 5 countries. We provided technical assistance in how to implement the ABC for sustainability and also the social art for behavior change approach. We supporting operational and strategic planning. We provided strategy and we provided a vision. And most particularly, well, we all remember 2020 when the pandemic hit. We supported all the executing agencies to adapt to the new way of doing things. We had to support them and to co-create with them new ways of working, new ways of adapting our approach, the social art for behavior change, to very in-person activities to more virtual or to more adapted to the new context, right? So I think I will stop here, Isabel. I'm very happy to continue the conversation after the other panelists. Thank you very much.
I think it's a beautiful description of the intermediation role, and a great segue to María Elena Nawar. We've been working with María Elena and with Sergio Navajas, who's also here, helping them look at the IDB Lab and what they're doing. And María Elena has been part of the community of practice for a long time. And it's a great segue to the role that the IDB Lab plays in the scaling up process. María Elena, over to you.
Great. Hi. Let me just share my screen with everybody. Thank you, Isabel, for having IDB Lab represented here today. We're really excited to can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, great. Let me just put this in the share mode. Great. So thanks for having us here at this conversation, because it's very timely. As Isabel mentioned, we just concluded a study with Imago that sought to help us really understand what the factors in terms of scaling our projects are, what the success factors and failure factors, and we wanted to get at a much more granular level what those factors are. So I'm just going to also mention that this year marks the 30th year anniversary of IDB Lab's establishment. So we have a lot of lessons overall about what we do, but also in the area of scaling. So just to give you a little bit of context about IDB Lab, for those who might not know the IDB group, it's one of three arms of the IDB group. The first one being the public sector arm that provides lending to ministries of government in the region, in the 26 countries in the region. And then we have IDB Invest, which is the private sector arm, which provides private sector lending. And then there's IDB Lab, which is actually a fund that's administered by the IDB with its own resources and its own governance structure. And we finance very small projects, innovative projects, with the intention to scale. So what is the purpose? What is it? What is the focus of IDB Lab? We seek to unleash the region's entrepreneurial talent to address the current economic, social, and environmental challenges. And we focus in two areas in particular. One is first focus on the poor and vulnerable populations by providing them with enhanced capabilities, new opportunities for income generation, and increased access to essential services. And at the same time, we also look to activate engines of growth so that they're more sustainable and inclusive. And in that aspect, we work directly with fostering innovation and innovation ecosystems and creation of new markets. How do we do this? I'm going to focus on the bottom squares right here. Again, because we are the innovation lab of the IDB group, we seek out partners that are testing new technologies or new business models. And we also work with ecosystem partners such as incubators, company builders, funds, fund managers, to be able to develop and help grow that entrepreneurial ecosystem. And we work in these 5 thematic areas, which are agricultural, natural capital, essential services, which is water, sanitation, and transport, talent and employment, health, and financial inclusion. And then, of course, what we see in many organizations is we have these 2 cross-cutting themes, which are climate and also gender diversity. So that's just a little bit about IDB Lab. Also wanted to mention our continuum of financing, because this is very relevant for our scaling. So this is how we see our continuum of financing and our scaling approach. We do work with very novel ideas at the pre-seed level with very small amounts of resources, generally in the form of grant financing. And again, this is when something is a really novel idea and we're there to test and to support the entrepreneurs and the disruptors in the region. And then as we move along, we see that the amount of financing increases, but also the types of instruments that we provide are more on the reimbursable side. And as we move along the continuum, when we get beyond the 2.5 million or $5 million amount, either in the form of equity or debt, this is where within an organization like the IDB group, we can then refer our clients to the other arms, such as the public sector and IDB Invest, to be able to provide follow-on funding or to adopt the solutions into the loan programs. So here is just a bit of, I wanted to discuss a little bit about the evolution of our scaling approach over the years. Again, as I mentioned, it's been 30 years. And I wanted to just kind of mark these kind of 4 periods in the time of how our scaling approach has evolved and our understanding of what scaling is. And a lot of times, I think what happens is that we confound a lot of the terminology, such as sustainability and growth and scale and replication and expansion. And so we have been over the years understanding and also better defining that so that we can measure and assess and also improve on our scaling approach. So in the first part, you will see it was really mostly based on a demonstration effect. The supposition here was that if our results were good and we communicated those results and the entity and the model was sustainable, that there would be a natural tendency or an interest in wanting to scale that pilot or that model. So that was the supposition, and we realized that that wasn't enough. So in the second phase, we did a lot more to systematize and to develop sustainability plans, scaling plans, communication plans, also creating series of knowledge products to be able to more systematically communicate that information. And then also we invested quite a bit of money, time, and resources in impact evaluations to really provide that proof of evidence that these solutions were working. And also working on quality at entry to make sure that there was a scaling really embedded from the beginning at the design of the projects. Then the third phase, and this I would say was more of a transition period, because it's during this period that IDB Lab went through an extensive restructuring, and our personnel was reduced from about 200 employees down to 95 or so, which is the number that we have today. So as you can imagine, a lot of these efforts that we were doing in the past were diminished. We had to be more lean and mean. What remained though was the measurement part, and there we were very keen on understanding what our scaling levels were. So in 2017, or the projects that closed in 2016, which we measured in 2017, we had about 17% of our portfolio was scaling. Fast forward to the next phase, which is the phase that we're in now, we continued to measure, and we saw an improvement in the percentage of projects that were scaling, which we moved from 17% in 2017 to 2023 today, 32%. But we didn't understand why. And so that's where we brought in Imago, and I wanted to share some of those results. But before going to Imago, I just first wanted to publicly acknowledge and thank all the great work that Larry and Johannes and this community of practice, and as Isabel mentioned, I've been participating in a lot of these events, and I know Larry from many years ago, and we've fortunately have stayed in touch. So he shared a lot of the great work that the community of practice is doing, and we shamelessly stole a lot of the concepts, the key concepts, and the toolkits that are in a lot of the knowledge products that the community of practice develops to be able to create what we call our iDelta, which is our quality and entry tool. And you will see that a lot of the dimensions in our iDelta were taken from this publication. So this really provided us with the footing and a better understanding of how scale is understood and how we measure it, and going to the next level, which is really getting at how do we improve our scaling approach. So just wanted to go into the main findings. Again, Imago helped us tremendously this past year in analyzing 122 projects that we selected as a sample to understand how we're doing in scaling. And this first part of the slide describes what are the different pathways to scale, and then also what kinds of organizations or what kinds of models are mostly associated with those pathways. And very much aligned with what Álvaro was mentioning in terms of, what are some of these success factors? And this is what was uncovered, which also aligns with other studies that we've done in terms of what makes a successful project overall. Number one being the executing agency's capacity and experience. And I want to venture to say that if there's something really key, this is probably explains most of the results in the success of our projects and then the success in scaling. The other thing, which is very related to this, is the combination of instruments. When we saw projects that combine reimbursable financing with technical cooperation that helped the organization build their capacity and strengthen their ability to convene, to measure, to market their solutions, we saw an improvement. Also, the larger the project, the more likely to scale. Obviously, resources are needed. And so on that continuum that I presented earlier, those teeny tiny projects really had a long way to go in order to reach that level of scale that was necessary to have an impact. And then, of course, another thing that was mentioned earlier, the longer engagement, the greater levels of success. And so I think there's this hopeful or wishful thinking, I should say, that scale can happen in a very short period of time. And I think there's an expectation also with technology that that timeline can be accelerated. But what we're learning is that these processes are complex, and there are a lot of moving parts and a lot of players that are necessary to get involved in order for scale to be successful. And another key finding, of course, is that we already had the anecdotal evidence, but the Imago report really validated this, that intermediation is definitely critical. And we saw the greatest level of success among those projects where our officers were very much involved in either introducing our implementing partners to new organizations that could help and support, or new sources of financing that could be used in order to grow the business. So this was something that has been done, unfortunately, not in a systematic way, but more in a sporadic and mostly done by the officers because out of professional interest or self-initiative. So what we want to do is we want to systematize that, and Imago is helping us to come up with the key functions that you'll see there on the right to make this much more integrated and operationalize that function as part of our design and implementation strategy with our projects. And then finally, I'll just close here with some additional recommendations that came out of the report. Having greater clarity and consistency on the concepts of scale is important. like I mentioned, we drew a lot from the information and the knowledge products from the community of practice. But we need to really do a much better job of explaining more thoroughly and providing the coaching to all of the organization and repeating those messages and repeating that assistance, especially when there's a lot of turnover within the organization. We also, another concept. So, okay, yeah. Yes, of course, yeah. And then, of course, the focus on scalability. Reaching scale, as I mentioned, is it's a long-term endeavor. And so we can't expect the projects to reach scale within a 1 to 2 or 3 year period, but rather think about scalability, the potential for scale as an element that's important. And then, of course, the creation of the intermediation function, and then really boosting our ability to track and learn from our mistakes, another key factor that we're going to be implementing more systematically. So again, thank you for the opportunity to share these lessons.
Fantastic, Elena. Thank you so much, and I'm really looking forward in the Q&A to hearing from Larry and from Johannes. I just want to say, as we move to the other two presenters, that I really felt, and the Imago team felt, that the IDB Lab has the potential to actually show the way to other donors in this intermediation function, because there are so many efforts that have been done by large donors. I remember in the World Bank, the Development Marketplace, and you have, the UNDP, IDB Lab. It's very difficult for these innovations to actually scale within the organization because this intermediation role that IDB Lab is now taking as a central theme is missing. So they are going to be the first ones to be filling that missing part. So really looking forward to the results. Thank you, Maria Elena. So with that, we're going to go to Habiba Ali, who's the managing director of the Sosai Renewable Energy Company, one of the largest distributors of renewable energy in Nigeria. Talk about scale. So Nigeria has, by definition, to always be thinking about scale, and the social entrepreneurs there, I'm sure, have grappled with a lot of the questions that we've talked about today. So with that, Habiba, over to you.
Thank you very much, Isabel. It's been interesting listening to everyone share their activities that they are doing in, with the role of the donors in supporting the scale up of social enterprises. And I actually see a lot of, you also shared with what the people at IDB are doing. This sounds like a very good opportunity for us, because one of the major problems we see is we get financing to do pockets of pilots, and a lot of times you're done with the pilot and you have the pictures of the donors and all of that there, but then it stops at that, and there's really no scalability. There's no sustainability of the project, and that has always been one issue that especially at Sosai we've been grappling and finding ways to manage. One of the things we've done, say for example, I'll use one of our projects as an example to speak about. We in 2019, just before COVID, got a funding from the UNDP, FCDO. It's called Propcom Maker Fee, and we were to develop a business model that will ensure that women in rural communities had access to tools that could ensure food waste was reduced. So we developed an idea behind developing solar drying hubs in areas where perishable goods, especially tomato, that were in about 70% off was wasted during harvest period. So that was like a good thing to do. And for that project, we deployed 7 drying hubs with at least 22 dryers in total. And after that project, we had the dryers, we had the women working at the hubs, but the dryers were not enough. And the dryers needed more, we needed dryers, we needed more funding to at first when we're designing the project, due to funding limitations, because we had to have a counterpart funding, we couldn't build out the hubs very well. So now with that, we're finding out that we then need the women to have a very nicely built space for them to enable them get funding from certification from the National Food Drug Administration and Control. They needed a standard cutting, washing, drying, sorting area, and that was a very big one for us. So, and then it's very nice packaging, and then the process of getting the Food and Drug Administration and Control. So the idea behind the project was to develop these hubs in communities, have women cooperatives formed in the communities be the managers' hubs, so that they can provide drying services while at the same time also produce dried fruits, vegetables that they could also sell with their own brand. So that project, we now seek another funding from USAID this time, that now was also another counterpart funding for us. And we were able to get the women better machinery, like we're going to be able to get slicers, cutters, autoclave machines, extra dehydrators, and we were also able to add more, industrial type dryers, because one of the major problems we had with the other dryers was that it couldn't dry, large quantities and all of that. So as it keeps going, you find that for every the way, we realize that there's need for funding and there's need to scale. I mean, we're still trying to finish a solar drying hub should be. And then the idea is then to say, okay, pick up this model and then plug it in every community that are prone to food waste and, food degradation. So having the right kind of financing to enable us to do that is going to really, really be a huge one. I like the type of, when I relate it to what IDB is doing, I like kind of financing that's coming to Nigerian electrification project from the World Bank, for example, and how it's been structured. And maybe a number of people, funders can actually, or donors can actually look at that model where we're not being funded to do the whole project, we're being funded to cover parts of the project. And one of the biggest problems in Nigeria, as everyone may have known, is that there's a big energy crisis, and not a lot of people have access to reliable energy, for 24 hours of a day. And so the Nigerian electrification project was giving some sort of subsidy amount to developers to enable them, that's to incentivize them to do more connections. And they divided it into two phases. So there was the output-based fund, and there's the performance-based grant. And so for the performance-based, it's for a mini-grid type project where you can develop a mini-grid that gives 1,800 connections minimum. And for every connection you are able to do, which may be with the economics, it will cost you about 1,000, 1,800, depending on the kind of technology you're using. You get about $600 in rebates from the government. So you're still doing your work, but you're getting some sort of breather to reduce your expenses. And just for that electrification project, for the projects that we've done on that program, it's actually helped us to reach what you call break even. So we for a project that would have taken us maybe like 10 years to finally break, and we're breaking even. From the financials we're looking at now, we're going to break even at least 5 years. So that's the kind of model, I think, and then that allows us to be able to quickly go back, seek for more financing, and also replicate. So I think marrying grant and the kind of equity or debt or financial capital is very, very key, so that the grant type is reducing the burden, and then the commercial finance goes in and just, you know, takes it to the level that will make it grow bigger than it normally would be if you were still struggling at, you know, borrowing money that's expensive or short term or whatever. You know, the grant comes in to help levelize the ground, and then you can immediately get to a stage where you can build on top, and then you scale pretty easier. I think I'll stop here.
Wonderful, Habiba. That's very good. So it's not that you're needing the financing forever. You're needing this grant financing to get to a stage from which you can scale. Great. Thank you. Thank you. So now let's go to Nicola, who is was born and raised in Kenya, and she is the policy officer for Food for Education. So over to you, Nicola.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Isabel. It's an honor to be on this panel and to be talking on this issue today. I'm really enjoyed listening to my fellow panelists impart their knowledge in this field, as well as weaving in contextual experiences on the topic. This has really been an engaging and a very rich discussion, so I'm very grateful to be here. I'd like to start by talking about foundational understanding, and that is that the public sector alone cannot meet the needs of the most vulnerable people in our societies and our communities. And it's for this reason that social enterprises exist. It's for this reason that organizations like ours exist. And this means that there's a very critical role that social enterprises play. And that's not just in meeting the needs of the most vulnerable at the base of the pyramid, but also in making those steps, those critical and important steps towards achieving sustainable development goals. And I'm very glad and very grateful that donors are aware of the critical role that social enterprises play, because it is the financial and technical support that donors have that allows them to exert a leverage over social enterprises, over the manner in which social enterprises behave, particularly in developing countries. And therein lies the responsibility in donors to support scaling up and to support the development of scaling up pathways and the development of a scaling up ecosystem. And so I hope that discussions like this and a platform like this is going to help mainstream scaling up as a mindset. It's my hope that scaling up becomes a fundamental approach to doing business. It is imprinted in overarching corporate objectives, in donor strategies, in operational processes, in management incentives, in monitoring and evaluation of frameworks, and just becomes the guiding beacon with which to engage in development interventions. Right now, there's a bit of ego that steps in when it comes to funding. You know, entities have a bit of ego because they want to recognize and invest in the hottest, newest innovation and be the first person to get on the bandwagon of this new innovation. And unfortunately, there is an unreasonable priority on new innovations over reliable and consistent delivery chain services, such as school feeding. You know, there needs to be that same sort of pride in being an entity that supports scaling up and that supports the development of a scaling up ecosystem. And so it's my hope that with these discussions that there is a needle moving towards that. And so I'd like to now go back to school feeding, which is what our organization does. Our organization is called Food for Education. We provide hot, nutritious meals to hot, nutritious school meals to children in Kenya. We started in 2012, serving about 25 kids. That grew to 100 kids in 2015, and now we're serving about 100,000 children throughout Kenya. And we serve these meals every single day. So school meals is a very stubborn and sensitive cost. You know, you cannot seek to serve a child a meal one day and then disappear the next. And so sustainability is very important to our core. In addition to that, you know, the number that we're serving, although there has been a nonlinear growth in our recent past, it's still a drop in the number. We know there's about over 10 million children going to public primary schools in Kenya. And so we are looking towards increasing, scaling up our work and meeting a wider population of the base of the pyramid. And so there's a number of things that come into play that has helped us scale up in the recent past. One of which is the model that we employ. We have a hub and spoke model which allows us to reduce our cost. The second thing, of course, is our tech angle. We have a near-face communication technology that has allowed us to tackle the issue of using physical money and increases the access of what we do to parents who may not have been able to pay a lump sum at the end of the week or the end of the month. They're now able to pay through mobile money at a rate that is more reasonable for their economic circumstances, or that permits. And of course, the other thing that helps us, of course, is our donors. And we will not be able to do what we do without the support of the donors who have been with us in the past and continue to stand by us. Now, moving forward, as we continue to scale, there are gaps or opportunities that donors can come in and really support the scaling up of social enterprises in our context or in Kenya. And I'd like to talk about three things. So the first of which goes back to the definition of scaling up. Scaling up, in as much as it is the sustaining or the expansion or adaptation of a successful program or a project, it doesn't just happen on a horizontal plane. So it's not just about meeting a wider population or increasing geography of operation. And as much as that is very important, there's also a vertical plane that needs to be addressed. And that is where barriers such as the legal and regulatory framework come in, support in linking into the government, appropriate policies come in. And so I think there is, more donors need to understand the importance in the linkages and the partnerships between social enterprises and the government. There is a role to play by donors in weaving this ecosystem where these two entities can interact and can engage. And Isabel, you mentioned in your slide in the beginning, in your donor continuum slide, that there's an opportunity for the partners to see each other as complementary stakeholders in the path towards scaling up. So when it comes to addressing how to provide support on the horizontal and the vertical plane, it might be a bit difficult for donors who have only been able to engage with NGOs and donors who have only been engaging with government departments such as multilateral development banks to come in and sort of think of something creatively. But if you look at each other as complementary stakeholders, and there's a potential to creatively think and consciously develop an ecosystem with which social enterprises can scale up on the vertical plane as well. The second thing I want to talk about is regards to flexibility. I think that donors, there needs to be a bit more trust into the way social enterprises are run and operate, and it is the flexibility and the creativity that allows these social enterprises to get to where they are. And so as Álvaro mentioned in the beginning, unrestricted funding over a longer period of time does allow for the agility that is necessary when it comes to scaling up, making the steps to the scaling up pathway. And of course, the final thing before I close is now to sort of talk about the funding bias. There's Sub-Saharan Africa has the largest number of female entrepreneurs. And they need to be supported and they need to be backed up. And so there's a lot of opportunities for donors to creatively think about ways to set up this ecosystem of scaling up. And I'm glad to have these discussions here where we can talk about how this happens and talk about how it's happening in other contexts as well. Thank you.
Fantastic, Nicola. I totally agree with all your points. And actually a compliment there. IDB Invest and IFC did a study about the impact of accelerators on female entrepreneurs. And actually, it increased the difference, the gap between men and women, because even though you control for the same number of years of experience, for the same profession, donors felt that female-headed enterprises were more risky. And so we need to think about how do you create an ecosystem where that bias is actually removed. It's not just about competing at the same level, it's about understanding that there are mindsets that are important to change and to educate about the fact that female entrepreneurs can be amazingly successful as well. So thank you very much, Nicola. Great. With that, I want to open the floor for comments or questions. I don't know if anybody has their hand up, but if not, I wanted to invite Johannes to come in. I'm sure he has a lot of comments. I saw his comments in the chat. Johannes, you want to come in?
Am I on now? Can you hear me?
You're on, yes.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, let me congratulate everybody. It's been an amazing collection of commentary and experiences and presented in such a convincing way that I just wish so many more people than we have online. And we do have a big number online, but that would hear it. And we will make every effort to get the message out. Let me commit to that. I think we'll do a better job this time. But there were so many comments that I could make just sort of echoing. So, you know, there's of course the problem that almost all of you identified. It's the pilots nowhere, it's the fragmentation, it's the lack of follow-up, it's the, you know, many problems which you flagged. But then you also had important solutions. All of you, focused on success factors, and I think we need to sift through those and sort of arrange them all in a way that we can share them with others, so that'll be very helpful. Clearly intermediaries, that function that Elena pointed to, and that of course also others mentioned, I think is critical. To have clear goals and not just baselines from which you increase, but you have targets. I think Nicola mentioned that, you know, you have what was it, 1 million or 10 million children, so 100,000 is a great start, but really we need to keep working towards meeting the larger target. So having a vision of scale that we have to work towards, and not just a baseline from which we increase, is very important. The notion that blended finance and the sequencing of finance across the scaling pathway is an important angle. I think are very important aspects that you mentioned. I think the changing the mindset maybe is the most fundamental, and that, you know, means, from my perspective, means we don't really only have to focus on very specific aspects of the process, but what we really should be focusing on is to get people to think what happens beyond the end of the project I'm currently working on. That to me is the most fundamental part of the mindset. Think beyond project. Don't just think we need to deliver this project and that's it. We need to think beyond project, and that is sort of the basic mindset change. And of course, we need to think about, as many of you mentioned, we need to think about how to change the ecosystem in which innovators and social enterprises and those who want to scale up work, because it's the ecosystem that's so often constraining. Funders then have an important role. They need to try and work on all these fronts to be supportive, rather than actually act as a constraint, which I think funders too often do. Thank you.
Thank you, Johannes. So I have Sergio Navajas, then Larry Cooley, and then Rashid Tadese. Sergio?
Thank you very much, and it was really a pleasure to be in this meeting. Probably the only comment I want to do is the challenge that we all funders have in trying to get scale as the main thrust or the main objective of a project. Because usually what everybody wants is to be, of course, to present something new, and that is good for the press, good for relief, etc. But we need to find a way to show that just scaling by itself should be and could be an objective. So probably that's one of the things that we need to work more. And sometimes it's not sexy to just talk about scaling itself, because you want to have innovation behind it. But I just wanted to make sure that at that point across that is not only the topic, but how to make it the topic, the central part of our work.
Absolutely. How do you shift from project focus to scale? Very much. Thank you, Sergio. Larry?
It's a really thrilling conversation. I mean, I'm sitting here in just violent agreement with the whole discussion, and in a slightly avuncular way, just feeling really proud of our community for how far we've come on these issues. Congratulations to everybody involved. I would just want to, I won't repeat the things people have said, and this, I think, useful summary that Johannes fed back on some of those points, but I want to underline a couple of things. I mean, one of the things that to me is implicit in this is that philanthropy, for the most part, doesn't scale. Philanthropy helps a scaling journey. And the idea that somehow we're going to philanthropize our way out of the problem is usually not the right solution. So the question is, how do you use short-term interventions, these projects, to somehow change materially the course of what would otherwise be the case? And sometimes that will be a permanent subsidy, but then that really means to be a permanent subsidy, which probably means from the host country government on this. If it's anything else, it needs to find its way to a sustainable revenue source that can go over time. I think that does sometimes involve blended capital, but the more blended it has to be, the more complicated it is. And somehow finding our way to whatever that platform is what I heard a lot of people describing as they were talking their way through this. The second thing I would say is that the delivery platform for delivering at scale is something everybody talked about, and very typically the organization that's doing the innovating is not initially set up to be that delivery platform. So somehow it either needs to grow to be quite different, or I would say more commonly, it needs to hand off to someone. That someone could be any number of entities, but it's somebody who has both the reach and the technical capability and the incentive to deliver whatever that is at a large scale, which has a lot to do with logistics and funding and staff capabilities, quite different from the set of things that are usually necessary to get this thing started. So I really appreciated the comments that talked about what's necessary on the organizational development side or the handoff side to move from what works for small numbers to what's necessary for large numbers. And finally, it's just absolutely thrilling to me to hear the deepening of the conversation about intermediation on this, because unlike the private sector, where that's the more commercial private sector, where that's venture capital and investment banking, and people make huge fortunes doing that, in our world, that tends to be a totally neglected, very unromantic part of the process. And the fact that people are beginning to not only realize it, but to take on the commitment of investing in it seems to me a huge step in the right direction. And if we can, as a community, continue to promote that concept, I think we'll be doing the world a great favor. So again, a big thank you to the panel, everybody involved.
Wonderful, thank you. Rasid Tadese, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing the name right. You had a question for Álvaro? You want to come in?
Yeah, I was just waiting for me to get access to my camera and mic. Thank you, everyone. I really enjoyed your insights. My question was for Álvaro. I was interested in learning more about how, or for you to elaborate on the strategies you've tried with donors to reframe, unrestricted, flexible, and long-term funding for staff time or development in ways that is compelling to them, and how those strategies have been successful. Thank you.
Great question, Álvaro.
Great question. First is to show the lighthouse that exists in the business sector, in the donor sector. There are many examples in the world, in the region, in Peru, not many, but some, that they are doing a long-term strategy. In Peru, for example, there is a mining company in Ancash in the north that are having a 10-year program for education, and they select an ecosystem of solution, and they are consistently working in the 10-year plan. So first, I show the cases, and I explain the success and the rationale behind. The other example is trying to change sometimes the language of civil society or social sector into the investment and business language to show them what they do in their own businesses and their own financial investments and translate it into that rationality. How do they also have to apply it in a more complex sector as the social sector? So what I'm saying to you that why if you invest so much money to do this and to scale your business, let's apply that same principle to your own. And the other thing is I frequently create like community of donors or philanthropists or potential philanthropists, like informal meetings. I mean, a dinner, a coffee, a Zoom meeting, when I mix the converted one so they can evangelize the other ones. So instead of me talking to them and convince them, I bring a bunch of people that they trust each other because they are like peers, and I make questions, even in a dinner or even in a Zoom or even in a coffee, bring these topics in a more gentle way and allow the already evangelized donors could share their story, could share their rationale and start changing the mindset of the other one. Instead of us, Imago, Mosaico, IDB Lab, try to push it, we're trying to pull it when peers start talking on what it works and what is important to invest in a long-term, impact-based, scale-based approach.
That's wonderful. Álvaro, could you talk a bit about, you do some curation, right? So the some of the work that you do that is saying you're also building the credibility that the organizations that you are supporting for funding, there's some due diligence, could you talk a little bit more about that function?
Yeah, we, because of the research I made in Harvard about what makes social enterprises scale, we in Mosaico, we translate it into, we call it RISE. RISE in English, and it's a ranking of social investment. So there are like 8 categories or ways to measure the impact of social enterprises, their governance, their sustainability, their impact, their team. And there's a sort of best to work ranking of indicators. And what we do as Mosaico, we use this index or diagnosis in 2 ways. First, we diagnose the institution so we can help them in terms of their strategic plan, their fundraising plan, their board plan, but also is data to the donors and investors to see the healthy of the institution and where to invest. One of the missing links in when we compare the business industry and the social industry is that we have a lack or a relative lack of transparency and information, different from business and investment. So what we have to do as intermediaries is to reduce the gap of information and transparency from a technical side, from a third-party side, so allow to increase the trust of investors and donors, and also give them a specific data and information on where to invest. Not only invest in the programs and services, but also invest in the long term and in the enablers of scaling up.
Wonderful, very good. Valencia Lenero, you had a question to all the panelists. Do you want to come in, Valencia Lenero?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you all for the very interesting panel that has been going on. For me, the final reflection of the last presenter that said, which are the enabling conditions in order to allow for scaling in projects, was very interesting. And I would like to ask, because currently there is this intermediary platforms of incubators that help scale up for the market. But do you have any other examples or any other types of platforms that could allow for also scaling to institutions or also for scale for behavior? I don't know if anyone has a comment to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any of the panelists know of another platform that we could share? I can't see any.
Isabel,
So,
maybe I can.
Yes, Ernenek, thank you.
Yeah, I won't talk about like a platform for this, but what we are trying to do at OneDrop and with the Lazos de Agua program is to do more like replication scalability, right? So we have as a partner the IDB, and the IDB Lab participated in one of our initiatives in Paraguay. So what we try to do in the first phase of Lazos is scaling up through the government, right? So we tried to bring to the governments what they needed to make their programs more successful, so that we aimed that they were at least integrating some of the elements of the methodology into their practices. And I think our vision for the next phase of Lazos will be really to do it more in a more precise, concise, and more process-oriented way. We already have the IDB with us. They, like the Water and Sanitation Division, they already believe in the methodology. They see that there is a missing link that can be filled with this methodology. I think what we will try to do in the next phase is to integrate maybe some of these parts of the methodology into the loans, right? So we will keep you informed of the progress of this next phase. So that, but I think there is great potential. We have proven the model. Now we can take it at scale. There are many governments interested in the region. So yeah, I think that will be. It's not a platform. Sorry, Eva. I don't have a platform for you, but at least this is an example what we will be trying to do in the scale up phase of Lazos in Latin America.
Great. Any other examples, Nicola or Habiba, that you have seen of not just platforms, but intermediaries that are helping with the scaling up? You had mentioned I think Habiba had mentioned the World Bank project. No, this was, yes. Maybe
that was specific. This is electrification. It's electrification in Nigeria. But I would also like to mention, like, there's I don't know, Kiva helped us. We went to them for financing, so it's like a backward integration, quote and unquote. We went to them for financing, but they were also able to bring us back to scale-up programs that could help us. They were able to get us to open capital advisors. They helped us with getting access to AMI trainings for my team. So it's more like they gave us the funding, but they also intermediated for us to become better. And now that we want to scale up, they are also helping to share bigger financing, opportunities. I remember, I don't know if it still works now, but there's this Social Entrepreneurship Forum in Sweden, if it still happens. Luckily, we were also a beneficiary of that. Yeah, there's a lot of them like that. And some of them are also coming as fellowships, so you could be a fellow of a certain organization. Like I'm an Acumen fellow, and that has helped me to also be able to start talking to Acumen to get better financing. So I don't know. Those are the ones that I know.
Great, good, great examples. Nicola, do you have any examples?
Thanks, Isabel. So the comment that I had made was in regards to an ecosystem that relates to both the horizontal and the vertical plane of scaling up. Unfortunately, I cannot confidently speak on an example. So it's something that I can look into and perhaps engage bilaterally with the lady who asked the question and provide that information later. But this is something that I as well am keen on understanding on different contexts, how it's been able to be done. At the moment, as you mentioned earlier, the one successful example that I have is BRAC, but I need to go into deep understanding into how that was done and if that was an example of the scaling up ecosystem development that I've mentioned.
Very good. Johannes, you want to come in?
Well, I think there, a number of the innovation funds, such as the Global Innovation Fund, which is a freestanding innovation fund, but also innovation funds associated with bilateral donors, are now turning to support not just innovation and not just even transition to scale, but also are getting increasingly into trying to support scaling. The problem is that their resources are extremely limited compared to the resources needed for actual support for scaling. And the other problem is that they tend not to have really good ways of transferring their clients, if you wish, or they're good examples of innovations that have been tested to what we call the motherships of their organizations. So as in the case of IDB, Elena mentioned, yes, there is apparently some success with transferring clients from the innovation from your lab, IDB Lab, to IDB Invest, but it isn't succeeding for whatever reason, and that would be worth exploring further with IDB, its sovereign lending. So, why is this big gap between the innovation funds and labs and accelerators and incubators on the one hand, and the mainstream bilateral, multilateral, but also, let's be clear, foundation funders that provide large-scale funding at scale, potentially at scale, that really could be supportive. I think, if I may last comment, I think your initial graph, Isabel, of the spectrum of donors, I think is really important. And trying to figure out how that handoff from the left to the right, how that transmission belt, as I call it, works more effectively. That to me is really gets to the core of the challenge for donors, how they effectively collaborate to support effective scaling. Thank you.
So your help, Johanna, on filling that would be great if you have any other ideas of things that I've missed. Just on the Global Innovation Fund, I've been a judge of the larger scale part of the Global Innovation Fund, and it's very focused on impact evaluations. And it doesn't provide hands-on help. It does due diligence, but it doesn't really help in the intermediation function beyond the financing, which of course is important, but I think there's more to the intermediation as well. María Elena?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit to what I put in the comments regarding why we've had more success with our IDB Invest partner, our private sector arm versus the public sector arm. I think there's a couple of factors. One is that there's a very clear indication with our real private sector, the startups, the more entrepreneurial clients, you can track their success in the market and their potential for scale, and also assess what their financing needs are, which is a way for us to build a pipeline also for IDB Invest. So there's, I think, an incentive there to have that relationship, and it favors IDB Invest greatly because they don't always have, I would say, the access to some of the clients that we have that social impact, but also can have that return on investment. So I think that's part of the reason why we've had more success with IDB Invest. And then the other, with the public sector side, I would say it goes back to a comment that I made earlier about really providing that evidence about efficacy. Lazos de Agua is one of those examples, and having that connection with the infrastructure division, water and sanitation, has helped bridge that gap. But we don't always have that very compelling evidence to be able to really convince the public sector side that this is worth including in a loan operation. And many times what we've seen is that the majority of the projects that do scale with the public sector side are through replication. So they take a piece of the model or elements of the model, but don't necessarily take it wholesale, the whole extensive set components of the model into and embed it into a loan. So I just wanted to mention that to provide a little bit of a fuller explanation on what our success has been internally within IDB Lab. Most of the scale we've actually seen with other partners that are outside the group. But of course, because we're situated within the group, we want to make a push to really take advantage of the other arms of the group.
Wonderful. Thank you very much to Nicola, Habiba, María Elena, Ernenek, and Álvaro. It's been a super rich discussion, as both Larry and Johannes pointed out. I think it is really heartening to see how this has been evolving, this whole idea of the importance of scaling, the fact that donors are not really doing what is needed to mainstream this, plus the role of intermediation. And it's just wonderful to see the progress over the years, not that many years. And I am really looking forward to the work that Richard Cole and Johannes Lin are doing on looking further into the donors, some donors in terms of the mainstreaming, because as Maria Elena was saying, there's a lot about and Sergio also mentioned this, there's a lot of the internal incentives that are at play here, which in a way disconnect with the real need that we've heard about for this accompaniment of scale beyond the innovations. As Álvaro said, we don't need more solutions. What we need is this help in this process of intermediation. So with that, I thank you very much. This is going to be available in YouTube. So if you want to look at it and share it with your networks, we will have it to you as soon as possible. And Maria Elena also said that she will be sharing the report when it's available for the public. It's right now being translated into Spanish and going through the last bits of the clearance for the public use, but it will be a public document. Thanks to everybody. We're right on time. Bye-bye.